Thank you all for supporting Zen Peacemakers and uh, just by your presence, just by you being here, you support what it is we do, and you actually validate what it is that we're offering. We've been trying to uh, increase the frequency of these kind of get-togethers. We try to do this once a week. We're lucky this week. This is our second one this week. We had Natalie Goldberg 2 days ago. And if anybody has an email address for Alice Walker, I'm trying to track her down. I think that would be a home run to have Alice Walker as a guest, but I can't get past the firewall so far. So today, we're so blessed to have our friend James Ishmael Ford guesting with us, and he'll be talking about his new book called The Intimate Way of Zen, which I was fortunate enough to get an advanced copy of a couple of weeks ago, and I read it last week, and I couldn't recommend it more highly. It's really wonderful, and I won't spoil by talking about structure or the narrative arc or any of those things. I'll let James talk about it as he would like to, but it's a wonderful piece of work, and I didn't do a count, James, but you've written probably a half a dozen or more books prior. You're up there on my shelf, on the Zen shelf, in between. You're in good company, James. You're in between Norman Fisher and Bernie Glassman. So, so my mother was an English teacher, so my books are alphabetized. So there you are. So I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and hand over to James. James, give us a little bit of his thoughts and a little bit of his heart. And we will have time for questions and answers at a point where he'd like to do that. So warm up your vocal cords, and please, we like these to be participatory. So thank you again all for being here. And James, over to you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And all forgive me. I've got a little bit of a bug, and it chose to be right here. So we'll see how this all plays out. I actually had not seen a copy of this book until I never got author copies. I think I need to send a polite note to Shambhala. But I did get copies because the inaugural event is going to take place actually this Sunday, and I have I'm holding the copies for the neighborhood Unitarian Church in Pasadena that's going to be marketing them. But I finally have it in my hand, and I was kind of looking. How anybody who's written anything knows that there's kind of a considerable lag time from when you finish a manuscript and it turns into the miracle of a book. I've actually written another book since this left my hands and moved into the wonderful care of Shambhala. So I had to quickly try to remember what it was that I was trying to do with this little enterprise. I have become fascinated with AI, and as an author, I'm kind of intrigued by the torn emotions. On the one hand, of watching my work get integrated into some mega mind that spews it out primarily for profit, and my desire to share what I have to say. So I'm torn between resentment and gratitude. But I asked AI, what the heck did I do? And it told me. It said, the purpose of James Ishmael Ford's The Intimate Way of Zen is to provide a comprehensive exploration of Zen practice, integrating insights from Ford's personal spiritual journey and his experience as a Zen teacher and Unitarian Universalist minister. The book aims to guide readers on their spiritual paths by addressing the key aspects of Zen practice, such as effort, surrender, and awakening, while also emphasizing the integration of these insights into our everyday lives. Through the use of traditional Zen teachings, personal anecdotes, and reflections on various spiritual traditions, Ford seeks to offer practical advice and spiritual wisdom to those on a quest for deeper meaning and understanding. I hope I pulled that off. Uh, uh, um, I thought I'd like to pause here and simply inquire as to um, what people might want to see a focus on. Um, I my initial idea for the book had a very loose frame, um, the 10 using the 10 ox herding pictures, and which is an ancient Zen map of awakening, and just to give it a frame. But I keep being told that that actually might have been the more important part of the book, and um, so there's that. I'm also interested in the questions of betweenness. Many of us, because we're not birthright Buddhists, the larger majority of us that it looked like on the screen, I'm going to guess, and so there's a leave taking, and there's often it's not a complete leave taking, and so many of us find ourselves kind of on our spiritual lives. Those of us who have embraced particularly Zen, although it was pointed out that despite its name, the Peacemakers is a much bigger organization than simply Zen. But I suspect that's a through line, like my Oxfording pictures, that people reference anyway. Um, but we're on a spiritual journey, most of us, and and there's this betweenness thing that kind of goes on, and that's a big issue for me. And both I have text and we could talk, just in general. I have other concerns that I address in the manuscript, in the book. They include some of the snares, traps, and graces that happen if on the arc of a life that is devoted to reflection. Um, a bit about the rubber hitting the road and what does this mean? The peacemaker component. Why is it? What is it we do and why do we do it? All these are all areas that I would love to spend a little time unpacking together if you find it interesting. Is there anybody who wants to help shape our conversation a bit? Otherwise, I will, be inflicting uh, uh, a structure on us.
James,
Jeff,
I see Peg Murray's got her hand up. Peg, good to see you.
So I'm just curious, seems like there's 60 bazillion Buddhist books out there. And what do you think didn't get covered or didn't get unpacked enough that your book remedies?
oh, thank you. For me, what I've observed is that in the growing literature, it's been really fascinating because I'm old, and I started when I started being interested in what Zen might be, there were a half dozen books in the English language, uh, um, and it was easy to read it all. And now, there there are dozens every week, certainly every month, coming out. Um, what I do observe often in there are numerous kind of general introductions. People kind of, I think that's legitimate. We need to revisit the matter, both as our collective wisdom deepens and our understanding broadens, but also each moment is somewhat different and requires its own focus. But I think most of what I see tends to be concerned with, well, how do you get started? and um, I find myself either that or what is this awakening thing? What is Kensho, and how do I get to it? And that's my spouse behind me, and we're I just as an aside, when we retired, we were living actually in New England. We love New England, but we found we needed to return to California to be near Jan's mom, who we have been kind of assisting. We moved into a condo in Long Beach. She lives in Tahunga, which is on the 40 miles away on the other side of the LA Metroplex. Tahunga, just as an aside, is an aside of the aside, is not Spanish. It's a Tongva word from the indigenous populations. It means the old lady's place. So kind of appropriate. Last year, Mom, as she turned 96, needed a little more presence, and so we now live in Tahunga, in the old woman's place. So you'll see some possible action behind us as we go forward, and the odd, what's going on? uh, Life. So back to the book itself. It's meant to be my reflection from what I think demographically I'm called middle old age, and somebody who's been engaged in the aspects of this spiritual path for a good 50 years and change, and I'm interested in, and what the book is concerned with is markers along the way. What are the more common snares and traps? What are the things that we're going to encounter as we go along? More than half the book is concerned with what life might look like on the other side of one's initial Kensho experiences. And so it's my attempt at offering a perspective on the whole of our lives as pilgrims on the Great Way. So that's the justification for one more book. Jeff asked, it's my sixth book, actually. The seventh, which will be coming out next year, from Monkfish, is my contribution to the little pile of first books. That's a different conversation, maybe next year.
David, I see your hand. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, yes. Hi, James. Well, wonderful to be here today. I got into Zen maybe about 10 years ago, and I've moved between several Zen communities and still finding my way. And so, as someone who didn't grow up in Zen and didn't, instantly have a Zen community, my spiritual journey is, at times sort of I'm figuring it out on my own, and I don't have a Zen master necessarily to look up toward and to learn from. So I really am here to learn about these markers for you, and just to hear more of your wisdom from someone who's practiced for so much time, and how to deepen in my practice.
Well, I think that's really wonderful, and we have kind of a very mixed bag gift handed to us today for those of us who are interested specifically in the Zen traditions. In that it's all here now. Each all the major traditions of East Asia have a presence in North America. Several forms of Chan, the Chinese version of the mothership, the original, Korean versions, Vietnamese versions, Japanese versions tend to be the dominant form still, which is why we use the word Zen rather than Chan or Thien or San. Um, um, uh, we also have this growing indigenous vision of Zen in, out of what I think we can still fairly call the convert population, although increasingly that's probably a misnomer since there are people um, who don't come from Buddhist Asian families, but are raised Buddhist, and a whole interesting population. But there, it's still there's this dialogistic thing going on, and what I find intriguing is that for you, you want to, among other things, I would say that I see three major styles of Zen kind of emerging. One for those who are interested in the practicing, there are the monastic models. Back to the mothership. Um, Vinaya monastics in the Chinese and Korean and Vietnamese versions. Um, Japan offered through a peculiar historical evolution that I could go on for way longer than you want to hear. Um, Evolved a non-celibate priestly tradition, um, which offers monastic formation usually, although in the West we're experimenting with formation models that are different now, for people who nonetheless have a ministerial and a priestly kind of part of the practice. You see that in the Japanese lineages. And the part that I actually find the most exciting at this point is the householder disciplines. That you don't, that formation does not require uh, um, an extended monastic experience, either in the lifetime sense of Vinaya monasticism or in the training sense of the priestly traditions. It tends to be driven by retreat. Um, um, it builds upon something that's historically, forever. Um, there has been a householder component contingent, including mastery of the way. But in the West, it's become the leading aspect of training. Most people do not become monastics. And in my view, what allows that mostly is the transmission of koan introspection, particularly what I would call curricular koan, a type of koan practice that evolved principally in Japan. Um, I would encourage you to kind of familiarize yourself with what's on offer. Look at who's offering in your area or online, um, and to know that just because you got a title doesn't mean you know shit. So, uh, um, you know, ask around and reserve your own judgment in the thing. You got to bow somewhere along the line, but um, um, I find it really wise to as I'm fond of saying, keep your heart open, but keep your eyes open as well. Did I kind of not? I
Yes,
hope.
absolutely. And I'm just curious to hear about moments or experiences that really deepened your practice.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
James,
Uh,
remarkably, Ed Sullivan is here, and it looks like he's got a question for you. And
uh-oh.
boy, have I got some questions for him. So, Ed, you want to go ahead and unmute?
Yes, reborn or resurrected, take your choice. Uh, in part, I think you've answered it, but this has been an ongoing discussion I've had with my colleagues about the evolution of American Zen.
Yeah.
When you look at, if we look at our lineage, for example, Mayazumi being our root teacher, let's say, in the early years, it was very, very Japanese. And I ha what I see, and I think it's a healthy thing, is that slowly we, not just White Plum, but other lineages, are moving away from whatever country their lineage has come from, and that we're evolving towards some sort of American Zen. I think is a healthy thing. As one teacher friend of mine said, he couldn't quite understand why Americans would be doing chants in Japanese. And I understood exactly what he was saying. Yeah, and I've had some of my students say, what does this mean? And sometimes I say, you got me. I really don't speak Japanese, but we do it. And I'm just curious. I think what we are moving toward, and this my question, we're moving toward more of a householder-based Zen practice in America. Just you share your thoughts on this.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. Um, there's so much going on. I mean, there's, I think we're definitely in a period of 100 flowers. What is going to be is not firmly written, though I have some views on the subject. But I think one thing that absolutely is happening, against which all of this is going to occur, is what I like to call the great die-off. Uh, um, 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 the boomers are on their way out. I'm 76. Um, um, and and we're the large majority. Boomers are the large majority of authorized teachers of Zen in North America. Um, in 20 years, most of us will be dead, and none of us will be teaching. Maybe one, yeah. And I've had different feelings about what is going to be here, and I I even for a while I thought, oh, this was just a boomer thing and the odd Gen X, um, but that's not so. There's clearly an ongoing interest and passion, and 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 I'm fascinated by millennials and Gen Z, and and what they're interested in. Um, I agree with you that probably the main thread is going to be a householder based uh, um, practice. I believe authentic Zen requires intensive periods of practice, but I believe that can be fulfilled in our sesshin models. Um, and that there are ways to have a a normative life, have a partner, have children, and and have and to profit from the specific gifts of Zen's disciplines. I especially think it works if we do koans, but which becomes the container that I think we need for the practice of Zen. But there are other things going on that have kind of blindsided me, and and make me um, in the Japanese derived schools, for instance. I never anticipated what I'm calling the back to Japan movement. Um, I'm observing it's anecdotal numbers. There's no statistical analysis. We These are best guesses based upon observation, but I'm watching a lot of younger people, especially in the younger millennials and Gen Z, who go to Japan to train. Um, um, the Japanese are Japan is a global North culture, and its religious institutions are collapsing, probably somewhere more closer to what's happening in Europe than happening in North America. Um, a consequence of that is, in addition to their training temples closing, and they have a lot of vacant temples if you want a job, um, um, it turns out all of a sudden, after years of neglect and semi-interest, they've become very interested in Europeans and Americans coming and training, especially if you're willing to learn Japanese. And well, if you're willing to learn Japanese, and some of those younger teachers, in as Zen has evolved in North America, becoming a teacher, as I really believe should be, it's part of the maturation of practice. It's not really the point of what we're up to, but teachers emerge, and it usually takes 20 years, a little less, a little more, before somebody is kind of reasonably seasoned to, certainly to teach meditation. I'm a little, I look askance at schools of spiritual direction, where where you take, you read, you read a reading list. I love reading, but and then have a little potpourri of experiencing practices, but they don't appear to be reliant on actually growing deep in a discipline. But we do that, in the Western Zen schools. In Japan, they're making priests, not teachers, and you can do that in 3 years, or less. And but the people who are willing to do that, they're like, fanatics. They're really into it. I mean, and I admire all of them, and I love several of them, and I'm very intrigued by that. So where it's going to go, I don't know. I'm more interested, like you, Ed, in how the shape of the householder practice, and I did just get a little note pop up saying, "What about your book?" Uh, uh, Maybe I should pause there and see, am I supposed to turn to the book, or was this an area we want to explore?
James, I think it's your call how you'd like to go. Uh, maybe turning to the book is good, unless there's any other questions or comments from folks.
Let me take a sip of water. Well, how about I just share from the front end of the book. I'll skip my biography. Even I am becoming bored with it. Uh, um, but here's what I'm thinking about the spiritual condition. In the Christian tradition, heaven is the goal of our quest. It certainly is the language of my childhood experience. Often it is taken to be a place found after death. But there are those who say whatever happens after the dissolution of our bodies, heaven is something to be found here. If they say here, they usually add in and now, as if time and space are completely intertwined, here and now, fully within the midst of this messy world. Enlightenment, another old word for the goal of the quest, puts the finding here in this life. This term comes from the Dharmic religions formed in India, is commonly used in Zen. Some of my wiser friends point out the word has lost some of its power with overuse. Sometimes I find endarkenment might be more helpful in this moment. Words are very important. They can point true, and they can entangle, trap, or mislead. Often the very same word ends up doing both. All words have their limitations. With those cautions, I found the word awakening rich in meaning and most helpful for me in evoking the goal of the spiritual path. It will be the word I use throughout the book, awakening. Let's see, where else do I want to go here with this? I go on to say that there are many maps, and the the one that I have kind of touched on here is, as I say in here, um, um, after making a reference to the five ranks, don't forget to share a few of your. I can't see what the rest of that was. Uh, um, Oh, my personal markers. Ooh, oh, okay. But let me finish with the thing about the Oxfording pictures themselves. There are two great maps actually in the Zen tradition. One is called the five ranks or the five modes. A lovely thing, and there's a couple of books now in English that are worth looking at. But the one that I'm interested in, and which I use as the arc here in this book, is the image of a bull or an ox to represent that hidden longing of our hearts. Possibly the oldest inspiration for this image traces to the Mahagopalaka Sutra, the greater cowherd discourse, which is collected in the Pali Canon. And that version, but the very version that has captured us on the Zen path comes really from the 12th century Chinese Linji or Rinzai master, um, Guan Xiuan. And oh, I should say, my pronunciations of English are barely adequate. When I move to any other language, I apologize in advance. I've had koan students who are, like, you know, Chinese scholars, and they generally, when I hold forth, when I come to pronouncing the names of the teachers and things, they tend to collectively look at the ground and wait for that to pass. Um, 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 so while 12th century China quickly moves to Japan, and then um, um, thanks to Daisetsu Tatario Suzuki, the blessed, as Shunryu Suzuki, the great Soto teacher, would say, the big Suzuki. Thanks to him, we have versions of the Oxfording pictures. Numerous commentaries in the book. I mentioned on my shelves in the office before we moved here. I had 5 copies of commentaries on that alone. Uh, I would like to briefly uh, uh, just say what they are using my notes here. The first one is called well, I'm calling the Entering the Intimate Way. It's we start the path. Or rather, before we start the path, we have a feeling, we have a longing, we have a cost. If we talk about myself, when I was I was raised very religiously in a fundamentalist Christian household. And on the one hand, there was my mother and my maternal grandmother, who was the spiritual center of our lives. Um, um, we were poor people's Baptists. I recall sermons where the rich were, all going to hell. And by later calculations, I'm looking at, I think that meant anybody above from middle management up. Uh, um, um, a form of Christianity that seems to have been kind of, I think you find it still in African American churches, but not so much among white congregations. On the other hand, my father, he'd been raised Catholic, and he was what I would call a scoffing atheist. He was very fond of Colonel Ingersoll, the 19th century great agnostic, and he loved poking holes in scripture, the corners of the earth and the big fish that swallows Jonah. Um, so those were my childhood influences, and um, I think my first big question was, uh, um, is there really a God? But we all have our own, why does it hurt? What's wrong? What's wrong? what is this? We all, we find our questions. That is the first part. That's the entering the intimate way, is that if we turn our hearts in that direction. Then the next step is making the step towards a spiritual life. That is our practice. Finding a practice, finding a path. The third is when we start getting little intimations of what's actually happening. We get these little graces, little surprises. Um, um, as I like to say about drugs, psychedelics, which is this kind of big thing now. It's kind of, I'm really surprised it's kind of circled back around from the 60s. There was about 5 minutes when I thought psychedelics would save the world. Um, um, and I've come to a different view since then. So it's kind of intriguing to see that it's re-entered, I think maybe in a more mature way than we had in the 60s and very early 70s. But there's one lesson I thought that it offered, and it speaks to this third thing. I think the one lesson that psychedelics actually offer us is the world is not the way you think it is. And these beginning intimations say, well, I remember I'm driving cross country. We're in Texas somewhere, and in the back of a pickup truck, in my imagination, it had a rifle in the back. But on the bumper sticker in the back was, "Don't believe everything you think," and uh, I actually think don't believe anything you think, but the invitation is to doubt and to some new vision. From there, then we actually find our path, and and I'm not saying that Zen is the only path. For me, it's the only path. It really fits my personality and needs and approach. But I've seen true walkers of the way who are Jewish, who are Christian, who are Muslim, who are Hindu. I've seen true walkers of the way who think religion's a crock. It entails bowing into something that will take us beyond our expectations. Then what would be the fifth? Generally speaking, people argue about where does Kensho fit in. I've seen some people say the third oxyring picture is where you have a Kensho. That's where you get these intimations. Most, I think, say, no, it's really more like the fourth. Where you really turn towards something. A few say, nah, it's like the sixth, and the fifth rather, where we find this integration of who we really are, and this commitment to a path, this going forward. Where the outside and the inside are, not so distinct. Then what I love about the Zen way specifically is that it's got these things beyond that. The one is, the sixth one I call the distant song, and this is where they use this image of the ox all the way. You see little footprints, then seeing the ox, and then kind of capturing the ox, and then this one is riding the ox home. We get a mature practice, which has its own traps, but we begin to understand the sense of harmony and balance between the ways that are, and then we get these kind of like lovely things. Then the ox disappears, and this is where I think I'm fascinated with something called non-dual religion, and And I think this is the reality that we find across the world's cultures in different kinds of expressions, but it's seeing through the seeming reality of our separateness, and it takes us into in different religious contexts, different ways. But in Zen and the Mahayana, writ large, um, we we come to the spot where the path kind of vanishes. There is simply a realization of an interconnectedness to all things. And then we get these let's see if we get them right. The next everything, in the auctioneering pictures, you get a circle, just an inso. Um, there is no other. There is no this. Words become meaningless. We're just boundless and wide open. And that's not the end of the trip. Then there's a nature scene. We're caught in uh, the, the the manifestation of the world. It just as it presents, just as it is. And that's not the end. The end, the 10th of the ox herding pictures, is usually a picture of a fat person walking back into a village, and 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 that's the practice for the rest of our lives. Is returning to the world with bliss bestowing hands is one of the commentaries given, and I see that arc. I found that arc in my own life. You got to use the map creatively. I know back when I was much younger, there was a psychiatrist. Her name was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she worked with dying people, and she observed these experiences people had, and she kind of packaged it as stages. I forget what denial, grief, bargaining, and it's, forget yeah, and acceptance. And she's gotten a lot of criticism later, but I think that it's misunderstood because it's a shadow we humans have, is that we kind of fix things, and the the mapping, the steps are for our convenience, but they're a useful fiction. We can have any of these experiences at any of the times, and usually we have several, and sometimes we don't experience one of them. And but if you let go of that, the map is really interesting. The ox herding pictures are quite useful, if you with a little humility. Not the human's strong suit, but a good thing. A good stop to pause, a good pause point. Does anybody want to go deeper, redirect, or push me in another direction? And Jeff, I can't actually see what's going on, so if you can guide this.
Yeah, I can help you here. Our friend Eve Marco has her hand up, and in fact, she contributed a blurb to your book. So
She exaggerated the value of the book, and I'm so grateful.
Oh, no, no, no. Thank you so much, James, and it's so nice to see you here. Let me ask you, since you talk about householder practice, we talk a lot about, okay, so we do sessions, retreats, we study koans, which you probably would agree is not enough. We could talk about what else is needed, but then we talk about integrating the practice into our daily life. It's like the mantra in this world. How does that manifest in your experience, that someone has integrated the practice into their day-to-day life?
That's such a powerful, thank you for the invitation. I do want to say, just by the by, because you had a little slip of the tongue, I think one of the contemporary Zen classics. One of the most important books to come out in the last 20 years is the Book of Householder Koans from Monkfish. In fact, my next book is coming out from Monkfish because I was inspired by them doing I forget who the authors are. But they are wise. So if you want to see a little bit about how the rubber hits the road and why Susan and Eve held up the our ordinary lives as the place of koan. I said Susan, Wendy, Nakao,
Agilku Nakao, yeah.
yeah, and Eve, and pick up that book. Pick up that book. It's more important than mine. What I see here is that I think how Zen came to North America was unbalanced. I think that if we look at the model provided for us in the Eightfold Path, it really breaks down to three parts. That the complete path has this amazing assertion about reality, this radical assertion of our absolute unity. We use the word emptiness, but all our language fails in this. It all burns away. Foundational, critical. As Dogen likes to, his version of the Buddha's enlightenment experience. I see that the world and I are awake together. The second thing is we got a little cluster of practices, and and in Zen we have two special practices that are really important. Sit down, shut up, pay attention. The miracle of sit down and become Buddha, and then the gift of koan introspection. And I am a koan person. I think they really are the unique gift of the Zen tradition, and you bet they ain't enough. The third aspect, and which has mainly been neglected, are the precepts. The container of our lived lives. On the one hand, as we're beginning our practice and frequently in our practice, the precepts, and for me, the precepts really are best captured in the 10 grave precepts from the Brahmajala Chinese apocryphon that is meant for everybody, monastics and householders, and is captured in Zen as the 10 grave precepts, and the Zen school, the Japanese Zen school, and you can even further reduce it down to the 5 precepts, which are shared by all Buddhists: not killing, not lying, not stealing, not misusing our bodies, and trying to stay awake. Not being intoxicated. They're containers at first, and then we discover they're actually expressions of awakening, and we need all three, and we don't, we have not yet found our balance. We're young in this. It's just, we're just getting going. We've got a few people who are pretty good at koans. We have a lot more people. We have people who have tasted awakening. We're still struggling with how to deal with the precepts. I think we've noticed, that an insight into non-duality does not make you moral, and a lot of damage has been done by good teachers. A lot of damage has been done. And then there are, true predators. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. But we're struggling with how to apply that. Right now, we have all Zen groups. If you want to belong to any of the big groups, you got to have an ethics code. I think these are like they're important. They're necessary, and they're and people are sometimes thinking, oh, if we have the ethics code, we're good to go. It's an ongoing discipline. and practice, especially important to find the integration of our spiritual lives in the foundational encounter, these amazing gifts of presence, and living a harmonious life on this planet. You know? So, did I wander off too far, Eve? Did I touch what you would really like me to touch on?
No, it's fine. Yeah, I appreciate everything you said about the importance of precepts. But it was more like, okay, so we have whatever we have from our study and sitting, but let's say when you're tracing your own students over many years, what do you see happens in their lives that shows that they're really integrating the practice? That's, like, how is it manifesting that, yeah, they're really maturing and it's entered their very marrow of day-to-day being? How does that manifest in your experience?
Well, the first thing for me is to let go of my expectations.
Mm.
And so it's a joint practice I've discovered in growing older together. I really want I'm a nice person. I like being nice. I want people to be nice. I sometimes think awakening is being nice, and it turns out that's bullshit. Um, um, we come into who we are in different ways, and so there's this dialogue for um, that's going on between that I get to have with those people with whom I've been graced to work with over decades, and we 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 continue to grow together. But what I see is that we all we come into who we really are, and the causes and conditions that create us creates different humans, and and becoming transparent to that and allowing us to, if we're a little sharp, to be a little sharp, um, um, to be family oriented, to not be family oriented. The critical thing against the backdrop of the tripartite gift of our practice is transparency, ever greater transparency, a willingness to notice our wrongness, which is a big hunk of who we are, and and um, to use an overworked term, to find love in all of this, to discover, and so what I see, like probably, I'm watching the person I'm hoping will take over. Well, he said he will. My the little community that I currently supervise. Yeah, uh, allow him. He's got this sardonic side, which is sometimes hidden by his vast erudition. He's just like, just super smart and very, very, very literate, and I watch how the dry wit has its place, and and then I think of my first successor. um, I want her to be nice. She's not nice. She doesn't have a nice bone in her body, uh, and it's caused problems. But what she brings to the project is this, astonishing clarity, and and those who can put up with her find a really good guide. And for me, oh yeah, that's right. That's another way it happens. And I guess I need to be open to wonderment to be useful. And then what I see in other people, I'm much taken. I did a whole little essay. I was trying to find the source of the line, and not I remember the one version of it is that it attributed to my Azumi Roshi that says, even if you love to drink, even if you've dealt with it, you you walk past a liquor store, your eye goes to the liquor store, and of course it's particularly poignant in his situation. Suzuki Roshi would talk about, smoking, be a little less violent, if you walk by the corner store, you still kind of look at the cigarettes. We all are that, every one of us. And when as I see it, as I grow in my own life, as I see it in the people with whom I've been graced to work, that stuff doesn't go away. How do we live with it? And we live with it creatively. And sometimes nobody's so far along the path they don't, can't fall in the well. And then for those of us who have vowed to be together, to help each other as best we can. That's
Thanks, Steve. Thank you. Folks, we have plenty of time here, and we've got James.
I got more to go if you,
Yeah, do you want to pick up where you left off, or go in a different direction, or?
How about skipping ahead a little bit, just because I was thinking about the peacemakers and the specific, as the Christians would say,
Right.
heroism of.
So you don't spoil the ending.
Oh yeah, now I won't. It's a never-ending story.
Yes.
As actually, I noticed the epigram with which I began this chapter 31. The old woman said, "Go straight ahead." But what is straight ahead in the midst of relationships? Eve Marco and Wendy Nakow asked that question. I recall once when I was a parish minister, driving late into church and hearing my local NPR broadcast of its BBC News program, sort of says who I am, my crowd. They were discussing poverty in America. The story led with some of those sound bites one hears from people, mocking what we call poverty in this country, pointing out how the majority of our poor have televisions and refrigerators. The talking heads often add piously how most of America's poor never go without missing a meal. But this NPR story only started there. They went from those comments to an interview with some children at a school in Nevada. They were homeless, an increasing part of our American population. Several of the children spoke of going to bed without eating. They struggled for words to describe their experience. "My tummy growls," said one child. My eyes began to water. Another related how how hard it was to sleep. "I waited until morning when I could go to school and eat." Another child said something so softly, it was hard to understand. The interviewer had to ask for sure what the child said. It was, "We ate a rat." I've never forgotten that. A couple of years ago, I was invited to talk about my experiences as a very long time Zen practitioner at a survey of Buddhism class that Paul Groner, some of you probably know Paul, was teaching as a visiting professor at USC, University of Southern California. It was fun. I love Paul. Well, mostly it was fun. As often happens in my experience, the best part comes when the students were invited to ask questions. One question turned on politics. Can and should Buddhists be socially engaged? A fair question, and one for anyone walking the spiritual path, whether they identify as Buddhist or not. In response to that particular student, I said something along the lines of, in the face of human suffering, how can we not respond? Later that day, I mentioned this experience on one of my social media platforms. Pretty close to immediately, I found a flood of comments, one of which I believe represents what a lot of people interested in Buddhism feel. The writer lamented the fact of Buddhist involvement in politics in the West. It quickly was clear he meant Buddhist involvement in left-leaning politics. He summarized it as the disease of social justice. Good Buddhist term. For me, it is important to try to not turn away too quickly, whether from something as material as a child's report on hunger, or something as digital as an unwelcome online comment. It's too easy to dismiss those words about hunger through embarrassment or reluctance or disbelief. It's too easy to move on from a critical comment, especially on social media, where so much of it is thoughtless and cruel. The hallmark of my spiritual practice. It works for my inner life, so why shouldn't it also be applied to my social life? That said, I have a visceral anxiety about our contemporary convert Buddhist involvement in politics. The fact that nearly all of us who choose to write or speak on the subject fall to the left of the North American political scene is itself a red flag. Not that it isn't complicated, and not that we aren't in a time that calls for public witness, which, frankly, despite the progressive views of so many in contemporary Buddhism, often seems inarticulate and often less than effective. um, um, Less than ineffective, so like really down there. So a red flag, but I'm not waving it with any energy. There are problems and people need to meet them and to do what one can in the immediate and to bring intelligence and compassion to try and understand why these things happen and to advocate for change. At the same time, I'm mindful how the Zen churches in Japan all fell in line with the imperial Japanese war rhetoric in the run-up to the Second World War, and how people who are very important in my spiritual lineages said things I find reprehensible. The examples I most think of are various anti-Semitic statements, which also, as most of the writers and speakers had no actual experience of Jews, were in fact used as a form of art, or perhaps better, a dog whistle for bourgeois democracy. So endless calls to caution. Another hesitation that's built into my spiritual practice is, as I said before, don't believe everything you think. The writer who objected to what I felt was my very mild call to social awareness offered another point in two quotes that I think cannot be ignored. One quote attributed to the Buddha as among his final words is, "With diligence, seek out your own enlightenment." The other, from the lineage source of the Zen schools, our ancestor, Wei Nang, is, "A true cultivator of the way does not see the trespasses of the world." There definitely are Buddhist teachings that the world is saha, something to be endured until it can be escaped. And what I take to be my correspondent's real point was that this world of tears cannot be fixed. And with that the whole project of Buddhism is being perverted by our contemporary and largely convert focus on social engagement. The real deal is escape. Wei Nang, seeing past the divisions and sins of the world, is speaking to seeing into the great empty. It is not saying don't be active in the world, especially in our Republican era, where governance has passed from kings and military leaders to elected representatives so far. I find my spiritual life and my ordinary life are inextricable. I don't have private views untouched by how I meet the world. There are traditionally two ways of engagement, both forms of spiritual practice if engaged with open hearts. Historically, Buddhism has in fact been pretty good about the first, service. hospitals, feeding the hungry, caring for animals. These are historically part of Buddhism. The second, social engagement, is a current of religions, but until the 19th century hasn't been a significant part of the Buddhist presence. It is today. And here, Jewish and Christian tradition, at least currents of them, are invaluable. They identify God's love with the rejected and the left behind. The ancient prophets were constantly calling the people to care for the poor and to seek justice. Jesus' whole ministry could be seen as identifying the kingdom as a feast for the lost, the poor, and the hated, along with some dark warnings for those who ignore the plight of the poor. So back to the questions I faced at that gathering of students at USC. They asked a number about social concerns and what Buddhism in the West might have to say about this. Here I found myself thinking of what has been emerging. A mixed bag, no doubt. Some of it silly, some of it possibly dangerous in unwholesome ways, but a whole lot of it a great intuitive turning toward the suffering of the world as the work of the heart. What is our liberation? If it occurs no place other than this wildly open world, how do we engage in a way that is more helpful and less harmful? As it turns out, there are any number of hints for us within the Buddhist traditions. One of my favorite resources for Nikaya Buddhism, the Buddhism that is most closely aligned with the Pali text, is Wapula Rahula's What the Buddha Taught. First published in 1959, its simplicity, clarity, and generosity of heart has kept it in print and read to this day. It has also been criticized as an example of the emerging modernist Buddhism, of which Western Buddhism, which I've been describing, is a subset. That caveat included, the Venerable Wapula offers an interesting analysis. And then I go into the various sources of ill will that are pretty classically of a social analysis that I won't inflict on you directly, but you can either read it in What the Buddha Taught or in this little sucker. The bottom line is, knowing there is a Buddhist presence, there is a Buddhist call, there is a Buddhist suggestion. How do we engage? And I came up with a list. It's derived from first from What the Buddha Taught, and then kind of adapted by myself. We need to start with generosity of heart. Then we need to bind ourselves to standards of conduct that support our aspirations. Lots of rules, laws, precepts. I like if nothing else, the 5 precepts. Recall, this is not about ourselves, myself. It's never just about ourselves. Commit to relentless honesty, especially about our own thoughts and actions. Try for gentleness, aimed both at ourselves and others. Recall, we are never actually in charge, and it would behoove us to act like that was true. Know that there's some very important criticisms of the Buddhist call to avoid anger, pointing out how anger can be the only appropriate response in some circumstances. There is nonetheless a legitimate warning about a clinging anger, what I'd call hatred, which has a napalm effect on our hearts. As with all these precepts, we need to hold them as all other created things, lightly, knowing there is a time to hold and a time to let go. But that does include a time of holding. Be mindful that the Buddha way is one of nonviolence. Cultivate a sense of patience, even amid urgency. There are injustices right now, and people are not in a position to wait. and all things come to fruition in their own time. Um, find the harmonies, act within the realities. And then finally, my bottom line, return to not knowing. Here is the great caution. We do not know how our actions will turn out. There are simply too many moving parts. At the same time, we're not excused. We must act. So, and then I conclude this section. I'm very near the end of the book. Um, um, to use the Zen saying, this is one continuous mistake. That's just how it is. I know how true this is of me. I don't have enough fingers or toes to count my mistakes, blunders, self-serving misstatements, and actions. However, if our actions are guided by the Buddha's broad guidance, and especially the 10 principles, then I believe we have a lot better chance of doing good than ill. No kid should have to eat a rat, not in the family. And who can be excluded from the family? A thought or two, a question, somewhere to go.
Thanks, James. Folks, we've got a little bit of time if you'd like to ask a question or share or react. Jacqueline, I see your hand. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was just really, really lovely condensing of mature Buddhism. And my work has been with mothers and translating the teachings for the everyday life of mothers. And that's a part of the householders that have been sorely neglected in many traditions. And I think that that's a really ripe place for the flowering of Buddhism, because it deals so beautifully with washing your bowls and the very nitty-gritty of everyday life. And I think that that's a really important place for the teachings to flow into as they're moving into a householder place.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Mainly in my, retirement, I work with a tiny handful of people that are mostly people I've worked with for many years, and the principal exception is a young mother, and partially I was inspired by well, she was persistent. That was the first thing, but the other was, in the standard line to a young mother is from Zen teachers usually is, come back when the kid is grown up. And we're not the only ones who do that. And there seemed to be something viscerally wrong with that. But it absolutely opened challenges, because it is my experience and observation that most of how we the turning moments are very much associated not simply with a sustained regular practice, but with retreat. Most moms just can't do it. It's just not going to be it's just not in the calendar. If there's a little bit of time off, they need some time off. So it's fascinating, working with my friend, and for me, it's caused, oh yeah, right. These are all upaya. Even retreats are simply means to allow us to uncover who we really are. And And what I've observed with this person who is deeply devoted to an authentic life and to transparency in her life, where the tools, the classical tools, are of limited applicability. She does sit. She can't sit every day, but she does. And it's chaotic and haphazard, but she throws herself on the pillow. She now she now has, I think, an 8-year-old. There have been times when that simply means pausing in the madness of the moment. And what I found fascinating, besides all the feelings of failure and such, was the graces that keep presenting and the opportunities for realization. There's many a joke about living with a Zen master, and it's not always a cat. It's often a child, and um, um, while we can do an analysis on the side about, monumental egoism as our idea of what a Zen master apparently is, um, um, they do throw up the unexpected and the graceful moment and the invitation. And I can report, um, um, being a mom, I have, with this one person I'm working with, it's an anecdote, but this one whose practice is sporadic, is devoted, is constant. The formal practice is sporadic, but she has thrown her heart into the transparency to what is, and specifically what is for her is raising a child, meeting a child. She had one of the more interesting Kensho experiences I've encountered among people I work with. Uh, um, um, yeah, and her project right now is integrating the damn thing. How to deal with this, and I am so excited by the possibilities that I'm seeing emerging if we open our hearts. We have standards, but we need to be open into what those standards really mean and into the invitations that they present. And absolutely, um, um, there's probably no more authentic way to be fully a person of the Zen way uh, than to parent. So thank you for bringing that up as a.
Yeah, I wanted to just add a couple things. One is when I was a young mother, I've been in the practice for 50 plus years. When I was a young mother, I went on retreat once a year. And even when I had money issues and divorce and all of this, I went once. I found a way to make it happen. So I think retreat is important. And when there's an understanding of the value of it, there's a way. It is hard for a householder to do that, and it doesn't need to be the main thing, but it's possible. And I did it through difficult circumstances. The other thing is that being a mother is a retreat if they're given the right tools to utilize it that way. You are dealing with selfless service, with unconditional love on a level that a monk, I don't know if they do deal with it. I think that we need to think totally outside the box and think in terms of like the Christian way of family retreats where the parents go in one direction and get their spiritual nourishment. The kids go to Sunday school and play, make things and stuff. I mean, I think we can borrow from that model if we choose to focus more on families. And if we don't, the thing's just going to be a bunch of old people like us. It really, if we want it to take hold, we need to really think about family.
I agree, and the old people will only be here for a while.
Mhm.
So, one of my favorite images I don't think it's up there currently, but the Brooklyn Zen Center, which is one of those really interesting models of integrated spiritual lives. I'm quite intrigued by them. I, do, they had a photograph for a while. It was one of those, extended pictures, and it was a series of Sabutans and Zafus. And to the left of the picture, there were a couple of people sitting in the Soto style, facing away from doing zazen. Then there were like two empty zafus, and the next three zafus were children playing. And um, that image has captured my heart. I think I believe there's a place for traditional monasticism. I think there's a place for priestly training practices. I do agree. If at all possible, people should do retreats. People should be as regular as they can in practice. They should take the precepts and try to live by them. And yeah, and the Spirit does rest where it will, and all we're doing is facilitating the grace of the world manifesting. It's like that lovely line about Guan Yin. How does she use all those hands, and it turns out to be like someone in their sleep reaching behind their head and adjusting the pillow. This is an invitation into grace that we've lucked into here, and may we continue to expand it, for the sake not just of ourselves but of the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Friends, we have just a few more minutes. If there's time for another comment or a question, if anybody has moved in this direction. Jerry, I think I see your hand.
Thanks, and thanks so much, James. I really appreciate this. I've been following your essays for a number of years, and I really like your style of open-heartedness, I think, about the teachings. And I'll just mention in passing that your essay on the Heart Sutra was one that I really found useful and great for presenting it to a group of people who were new to this practice, and so your interpretation was really great for that. So again, I thank you.
Which opens a spiritual practice I like to invite people into. Is texts are important. People get too caught up in the line attributed to Bodhidharma about beyond words and letters. There is a deep and profound truth in it. We also produce more books than any other subset of Buddhism, I think. And study is an important side of practice, and one that I have found an adjunct to that is I don't have a name for it. I guess I'd call it the art of paraphrase, and to pick to live with some text. The Heart Sutra is so important to me. I've lived with it for many decades, and what was really taking a word from I think it was Elaine Pagel's in her book The Gnostic Gospels, in which she's this academic who studied Christian Gnosticism, very important scholar in that narrow field, and she mentioned that there was some putatively Gnostic school that in order to be initiated into that form of Christianity, you had to write your own gospel. And I've realized that, like, I live with the Heart Sutra. I'm relentlessly monolingual, but I have read probably every version of the translation of the Heart Sutra. I've lived with it. I chant it every single day, and I sat down, at some point and wrote my own version, and it's not, not meant to be a translation, although to my embarrassment, I gather somebody has chanted it in their services. And it's nice to know it's basically chantable. I wouldn't advise them to live with it permanently, but as a, you know, an appreciation perhaps. But for each of us as a spiritual practice to make, you know, if you've lived with the Heart Sutra or some other text, write your own sometime. See what it teaches you. You know, and so that's.
Yeah, it's beautiful and people appreciate it. So thanks. Yeah.
Thanks, Jerry. Couple more minutes here. If anybody has anything I'd like to share or ask James. This has been great. I like the casual format, James. It's been like 40 people sitting around the living room talking.
It's hard to have a conversation with that many, but I hope we largely have.
I think you did. Well, perhaps if there's nothing more, perhaps James, we can wrap and folks can move on to their lunch or whatever's next in their day.
Whatever your time zone is. May I do a little advertising on?
Please do. Please do.
If you want a little more formal version and reading out of the text, this Sunday at the Neighborhood Unitarian Universalist Church in Pasadena, if you just look up Unitarian and Pasadena, there's actually two. The other is called Throop, great little church, but if you go there, you won't hear me. But if you go to Neighborhood on Zoom, you can hear me, you know, read from the book in a more disciplined way, and it might be interesting. You can find them on a simple Google search, Unitarian Pasadena Neighborhood, and it'll link you into their, you know, how they do it. I think it's actually a YouTube channel, but it's live.
That's great, James. And more shameless promotion here. Highly recommended. And do you prefer where people go to buy it, James? Is one location better?
Well, what I actually, in the moment, if you really want to buy it now, there's still the publisher is offering a 30% discount on the title. If you, the easiest way to access the code for that, I have a professional webpage, James Ishmael Ford, one word, jamesishmaelford.com. If you go to that, you open it up, and I like the second page is my pitch for this book, Intimate Way of Zen. If you go to it and scroll down to the bottom, you'll see the if you're willing to buy it directly from Shambhala, you go to there and you drop in that code and they'll give you a 30% discount. So that's the easiest. You know, that provides you with a deal, and I think that's good through the. Certainly. Oh, look at that! It appeared. Thank you, Johnny. Otherwise, it's available, you know, from your neighborhood bookstore, probably by special order, Amazon, yeah, whatever. Thank you for that link. Shambhala has, yes, it does. It provides it both in print and I think it is Kindle specifically, certainly an e-reader version.
Great. And I believe we have it up in our bookstore as well at Zen Peacemakers.
And Zen Peacemakers, yeah.
Well, very good. Thank you, folks, for giving us part of your morning or your afternoon. And James, 3 bows and kind thanks to you for sharing. And we will watch for your next book next year, I gather, 2025, perhaps.
Yeah, it should be early in 2025, according to my editors there.
Good enough. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much. Stay safe. Take care of yourselves. Take care of someone else. Bye-bye. Come see us again.